Thanks everyone for joining us. This is the nonprofit arts organization part of our Arts Week in Kentucky event. We had a really good first session with Heath Eric on marketing during the pandemic. And now we're going to have a really exciting panel discussion about surviving and thriving as an arts organization during the pandemic. I think you're all going to find lots of great information to take from this. I'm going to do a quick introduction of each of our panelists, but they're going to go into a little more detail for you. First up, we're going to have Steve Hoffman from the Center College's Norton Center for the Arts in Danville. Following him will be Lexi Millikan, the Executive Director of the Yeiser Arts Center in Paducah. Josh Mullins, Director of Advancement at Hindman Settlement School in Hindman. And finally, Heather Weston Bell, who is the Senior Vice President of Community Engagement for Kentucky Performing Arts in Louisville. Thanks to all our panelists for joining us. And Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And thank you for having us. This is such a great week and such an important week, so I really appreciate it. Wanted to start out here. Great. Well, the Norton Center for the Arts is part of Center College in Danville, Kentucky. And the building itself is a piece of art. It was built and designed through the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation in 1973. There are 2 theater spaces, and those are a 370-seat thrust stage and a 1470-seat proscenium theater. We are a multidisciplinary presenter, so we present dance, theater, Broadway, classical, jazz, Americana, roots, pop, country, as well as authors, speakers, and then visual arts. And with our visual arts programming, we have about 2 exhibitions a year. What we do is transform lives through transformative experiences, and that's our mission statement for the Norton Center. And we do that through the concerts, but also through discussions and jam sessions and workshops and master classes, school matinees. And I just wanted to point out on this slide some of the examples. We had the Dublin Quartet, Guitar Quartet at a senior home in Danville with that. We also invited a group from one of the local elementary schools. We also had a theater company come, and we worked with the sign language interpreters to pair so that they would take on different roles and interact as well as what was happening on stage. We do master classes like the one in the photo with the Alpha and Ailey Dance Theater. We have had great opportunity where we took students and community members from Center and the region, and we're able to pair them with the Russian State Symphony Orchestra for an encore. So half the orchestra got up and left while the other half sat and got to play with the local community. And when we do things like work with the Vienna Boys Choir, we bring in a lobby entertainment and have the Danville Girls Choir do a set as people are coming into the audience and into the theater, so that they can see that our community has similar resources. They might not be the Vienna Boys Choir, but there's still going to be, we still offer some amazing programs. And that's it.
Thank you, Steve. Lexi, tell us about the Yeiser.
All right. So Eric, if you want to go ahead and start the PowerPoint for me, I would appreciate that. So to start out, I just want to go ahead and say thank you to the Kentucky Arts Council for inviting me to be a part of this panel. Tamara, Emily, Eric, everyone there that's done all the work to make this week a great productive week for us. We appreciate that. I'm the executive director of the Yeiser Art Center in Paducah, as Tamara said. So this is our staff at the beginning of 2020. We had 3 full-time employees and one part-time employee. Our gallery is housed in the historic Market House in downtown Paducah. And our mascot is a big red yak, which came about because that's a fun acronym for Yeiser Art Center, YAC. Next slide, please. The Yeiser Art Center was founded by Mary Yeiser. Mary Bell Yeiser was born in 1905. Her family was prominent in Paducah history, and her grandfather, David A. Yeiser Sr., served 5 terms as mayor. Mary attended St. Mary's Academy, where she participated in weekly art classes. She eventually studied art in Paris, France, and she also studied at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, the University of Kentucky, and attended the Paducah Junior College and Murray State University, where she received her degree. Next slide, please. So Mary taught at Paducah Junior College from 1940 to 1942, and again from 1953 to 1971. She instructed many regional residents in studio art and art appreciation. And in 1957, Mary Yeiser founded the Paducah Art Guild to provide her students with the opportunity to view original works of art. It was her hope that the organization would form the basis of a city art museum. Next slide. The Market House building was built in 1905 during David A. Yeiser Sr.'s term as mayor and served as an open air market. Next slide. And this is the Market House building after it had been converted to use for indoor activities. The Paducah Art Guild moved into the Market House building in 1963, and that's where Yeiser Art Center remains to this day. So the building is owned by the city, but it's now split between 3 arts and cultural organizations. So we share the building with, it's Yeiser Art Center, and the Market House Theater is on the far end, and then the History Museum is in the center. Next slide. The membership of the Paducah Art Guild voted in 1990 to rename the organization the Yeiser Art Center in honor of Mary B. Yeiser. Next slide. Exhibitions, classes, and artist talks were held at the gallery and still are held there. Next slide. This is what the Market House building looks like today. We now offer multiple exhibitions throughout the year. Next slide, please. This is the inside of the gallery. This is Art Through the Lens, one of our international juried exhibitions. Art Through the Lens is a photography exhibition. Next slide. This is actually Robert Shapiro. He's one of the founders of the Paducah Photo Competition, which eventually became Art Through the Lens in 1975. He's entered work in the exhibition, served as a juror, and helped to sponsor it throughout the years. And he's just one example of an artist member who actively participates in our events and exhibitions throughout the year. So we have approximately 200 art, members, many of whom are artists. Next slide. Our regular program includes field trips and artist talks, and we serve not only Paducah, but the greater Western Kentucky or Purchase area region. Next slide. Our other juried international exhibition is Fantastic Fibers, which began in 1987 with a focus on wearable art, and it has changed over the years to incorporate more contemporary and conceptual fiber art. Next slide. Fantastic Fibers is held each spring during AQS Quilt Week in Paducah, where we get visitors from all over the world and we get submissions from all over the world. Next slide. Unfortunately, Quilt Week was canceled last year and this year, but we still had a large number of submissions each year. Next slide. We also host an exhibition for our local high school teenagers each year called Teen Spirit, and have other opportunities for artists like our Holiday Art Bazaar. Next slide. Last year, we introduced a new exhibition called Visible, which was dedicated to Black, Indigenous, and people of color who've been historically underrepresented in the art world. Next slide. We're always working to provide a diverse range of programming that gives opportunities to many different kinds of artists. Next slide. We hope to continue this type of exhibition in the future in order to make sure there's more equitable representation in the arts in our community. Next slide. Along with exhibitions, we host classes and workshops throughout the year, usually supported by grants or local sponsors. Next slide. We also focus on education for children, public art projects, and collaborative artworks in the community. Each May, we host the Lowertown Arts and Music Festival, which is a free festival for the community. And we work closely on these events with the City of Paducah, Parks and Recreation, Paducah School of Art and Design, and many of the other nonprofits in our area. Next slide. Our annual members exhibition is what's currently on view at the gallery. Next slide. We're happy to be welcoming more student members into our organization. Next slide. This is a photo taken by JT Crawford, who's a local artist. This is what our downtown looked like last week. And we just love working in this historic downtown. It's a really growing area. Next slide. Our exhibition calendar for this year, we're hoping to be able to have all of these exhibitions as planned, and we have started a new Keep Paducah Creative initiative, which I'll talk more about in our panel discussion. Next slide. That is my short and sweet explanation of what we do at the Yeiser. So you can follow us on social media and feel free to reach out to me directly after this presentation if you have any questions or ideas for collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, Lexi. Let's see, Josh, tell us about Hindman.
Hi, everyone. Josh Mullins with Hindman Settlement School. So thankful to be a part of this today. We do have a video that we are hoping works out well. I don't know, sometimes that doesn't always translate, but even if the picture comes across a little choppy, hopefully the words you hear and the images that you do see will shine a little light on the work that we do. So go ahead and cue that up. I think Eric's going to play that for us, and we'll happily share a little more afterwards.
The school sits across the bridge going up into the hills. You come down this long winding road and you're following along Troublesome Creek. There's something that settles over the school that's very special.
It's one of our great gathering places in the mountains where people can come together and learn from one another. That's always been at the heart of the founders' mission and purpose for the school.
It's an epicenter for food, culture, agriculture, music, poetry, prose, and it's all turning right inside that school.
The Hindman Settlement School is one of the places that has been a wellspring for those traditions to thrive and be incorporated into 21st century Appalachia.
The settlement school's nearing 120 years old, and so we have the chance to continue to speak into the lives of people in this community that have understood the presence of Hindman Settlement School for all this time.
I'm gonna sing you the story, okay? And when it comes to the chorus, you count with me, okay? 1, you'll have sorrow. 2, you'll have joy. 3, get a present.
When you look at the history of Hindman Settlement School being the first rural settlement school in the country, it was founded during a time of transition.
Their philosophy was to offer education to students who did not have an opportunity at that time to receive an education.
Culture is alive, it's always changing, it's always shifting and moving, and so you see that with their programming.
Around 40 years ago, our school transitioned to primarily serve students who struggle with dyslexia.
Anytime you see an E or an I after C, it's gonna say the S sound. Let's keep practicing that.
As a parent and a teacher, I felt like I should be able to help him, and I could. He would cry, obviously I would cry. It was just a struggle because, you know, he was falling behind and I could see that.
What we want to instill in our students is that they can really do anything. We want to cheer for them. We want to encourage them. We want to help them not experience failure as much as possible.
Maybe it's just our imagination, Alfred replied.
They gave him some skills to learn to cope with his dyslexia. His communication skills were better. He felt more confident. He opened up. He made friends. He just blossomed.
When we empower people to do those things, then that comes back to the community in many ways.
As Eastern Kentucky as a region, as an economy goes through a big economic transition, Hindman is one of the places that's offering a new vision forward for what that could look like.
Dustin, we need 14 or 13, right?
13 and a half.
13 and a half. Whoa.
The Hindman Settlement School started to get interested in foodways.
Foodways is a unique word to describe the types of things that we do here in Hindman with local food and agriculture.
There have to be other community connectors that can connect people who need healthy food to the healthy food that's available. And the Hindman Settlement School Processing and Teaching Kitchen and the farm is really serving that role. It's really true that food is love. When you take the emotional content out of food, you lose that bond to something that you need to survive. That has a big impact on an individual person and on the community that they live in.
In order for us to be able to change that conversation with local families, what we have to do is to look at how we look to the land and to figure out how that land sustains us.
My great-great-grandfather bought a large tract of land. It's been handed down through the family.
Ray, Thaddeus, come on, girl.
He had acres of strawberries, and he had a greenhouse out back for bedding plants, and he sold strawberries and bedding plants. Growing bedding plants I had never done in my whole life. Now, I couldn't have kept those puppies alive if I didn't go every other Tuesday to Hindman.
It's about being self-sustaining. It's about supporting the people that you know and love in your community. It's about supporting your history and your culture and keeping people on the farm. Let's take that legacy and now see how it can completely change the way we think about food in Kentucky.
We have the opportunity to sit at a lot of those tables where those conversations are taking place about what does Eastern Kentucky look like next. More than anything, I think what we all have to understand is that we have to reimagine what a future Appalachia looks like. There's not going to be one answer. There are going to be multiple answers. And I think we have to be open to all of them.
That's one of the really important roles that the settlement school is playing in this time, is just as that gathering space where people can come together and celebrate what's good about the region, celebrate and evolve those traditions, and dream about what the next 117 years might look like.
So that tells a little bit about the school. Of course, we are beyond solely working at arts, as you've been able to see there, but arts is infused into every aspect of the settlements program, from our dyslexia work and how we serve students and embrace and share the arts with them, and how arts and food intersect together in our food waste program. So I don't want to take any more of your time, but I hope you enjoyed that look into Hindman Settlement School, and we'll share more later through the panel discussion.
Thank you, Josh. And finally, we're going to see what Heather has to offer about Kentucky Performing Arts.
Thank you. Get loaded up here. Okay, I'm so thrilled to, is my PowerPoint good? Are we good on technology? I'm so thrilled to join you all, and thanks so much to the Kentucky Arts Council for the opportunity to be here today, and to join, so many colleagues and partners on this call here from across Kentucky. It feels great to be here. I wish we could all be in person, but I think this is what we can do right now. This is the next best thing. So Heather Bell, Kentucky Performing Arts. We are a nonprofit arts organization based in Louisville. And I just want to give you a bit of an overview, including sharing some of our history. So we started as the Kentucky Center for the Arts. We opened our doors in 1983, and we did so to put a cultural face on the Commonwealth. It was a really different time then. We didn't have the number of performing arts centers and organizations across Kentucky like we do now. It's a totally different climate, which is pretty awesome to see that. I think ideally having organizations in communities and having that access is so important. But we opened in '83 to sort of put Kentucky on the map, be that cultural face, and have the opportunity to, one, provide a home for Kentucky organizations, arts organizations, for professional stages, as well as to attract touring national and international artists. So tourism has been a huge part of our reason for being, our purpose from the beginning. And what's unique about Kentucky Performing Arts is our relationship to the state. We sit alongside the Kentucky Arts Council and the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet, and that's very much tied to how we began. It was a public-private partnership with government, business officials coming together to, over multiple years and many rich dialogues, bringing the Kentucky Center to life. So to this day, we remain connected to the state. The Kentucky Center building itself at 501 Main Street has a number of venues within it, and it is actually a state asset. Though again, we are a nonprofit organization, different from the Arts Council. I am not a state employee. Our employees are not state employees. So just a little uniqueness there. Our mission, our purpose is to build lifelong relationships with the arts. And so we do that through experiences that certainly involve serving audiences in our venues, but also, as you'll hear a little bit more, going beyond venues. We have long put forth the idea that we are much, KPA as a living, breathing organization is much more than bricks and mortar. It's much more than venues and theaters, but it is experiences, and they can happen anywhere. And it all starts with the relationship piece. So that's a little bit about the Kentucky Center. And then fast forwarding a little bit in our history, we have long managed the Brown Theater that was once managed by the Fund for the Arts, but in 2018, we purchased the Brown as another extension, another stage, and another opportunity to convene people. And then lastly, it's been an interesting few years here. In 2009, we opened a brand new venue, Old Foresters Paris Town Hall, in the summer of 2019. We were about 6 months into programming that venue when the pandemic hit. So we are eager, as everyone is, to really reopen and continue the work. But across these spaces and in our overall mission, we serve over 500,000 people a year, typically. And with that, here we go. Additionally, we have about 1,500 events, and they're very much obviously rooted in working with different nonprofits, performing arts organizations, but like Steve, certainly at Center there in Danville, we do a variety of events. So hosting naturalization ceremonies and being home to the Festival of Faiths. So it takes many different shapes, but a huge core part of who we are and is, all become too clear in this last year is this role we play as partners with a number of organizations in our community, the orchestra, the ballet, the opera, Broadway, Stage One Family Theater. I saw Andrew's on the call. We have 60,000 young people that pull up. They don't pull up, their buses pull up, and they make their way into the Kentucky Center, and their jaws drop at the art that is surrounding them, and then they go and experience, the magic of theater through the work of Stage One. So we're so proud of being connected, being a part, and finding ways that we can allow these organizations to fulfill their missions in utilizing our spaces. We also are a presenter, as Steve mentioned, some of the amazing performers that they have brought to their community, and then in turn, bringing others from surrounding communities to Danville, similar to the center across all of the residents, the resident organizations, but we are a presenter too. So yes, Alvin Ailey, can't wait to have them back. Looking at presenting artists from all different genres. This has always been important to us. And we absolutely, recommit and are doing some real deep work now and looking at booking next year and beyond. How can we really truly be sure that we're presenting experiences that are for our entire community, that are reaching and representing Kentucky and all the communities and members of various communities within our Commonwealth. So it's a huge part of who we are. On that tourism piece, Polestar, we've a number of times been recognized for being a top venue worldwide. So that feels pretty good, of course, to see those tickets making those lists. A cornerstone, and again, similar to Steve, because I think you'll find this with performing arts centers, we're a community-based organization, just as the others that are on the call with Lexi and Josh. So how can we, even when we're working with national artists, how can we make a real connection to the community? So I think a cornerstone of what we do, not with every artist, but I'll use one for example, Black Violin that we've brought in the last year and a half. They could just come in and take the stage and entertain an audience for an evening. But with this group and with many others, we really try to build out what's a connection we really can have within the community, so we can work with young people, work with other community organizations to really deepen the impact they can have. So it's an impact to they as artists and how they're able to share their craft and their talent. But then also for our community to enrich the lives, to hopefully plant a seed to further young people in their own arts development. So our presenting is a huge part of what we do. Briefly, I'll just share, we have a number of education and community arts programs. It's been core to who we are from the beginning. We created the Governor's School for the Arts with the state in 1987. Nick Kovalt is a fantastic leader that's leading that program right now. Served on one of your panels earlier in the week. And this is a program that serves young creatives across the Commonwealth. If you don't know much about it, please use all the social media to dive into GSA. We're auditioning young people right now across the Commonwealth. This is a program for high school students. It is offered at no cost thanks to funding from the state and thanks to fundraising that we do at KPA to make that happen for these young people. And then additionally, we have a history of again, not just relying on the community to come to us, but how do we engage with the community? So being a partner to what those needs are. Over 2 decades ago, in the creation of our Arts Reach program, we started working in community centers because they were very much athletics based and they were focused on academics. How can we create an arts culture and build the capacity and engagement of our community centers and other nonprofits? So I won't go through each of these, but I just more than anything want to share that notion of within the work of all of our arts organizations, that deep connection to community and being responsive to what the needs are in those communities. We are revisiting and going through a process with our boards now of a refresh on our strategic plan. So I won't go through each of these, but we're very much kind of guided through our strategic plan and a number of imperatives. We are working through our board right now around equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that becoming a part of actually becoming an imperative and being a core part of our work as we develop an equity lens to look across the organization. So it's an interesting time. I hope that I gave you a bit of the history of who we've been, and I think who we come back as when we reopen. It's very much rooted in that, but also going through a process to look at what are the needs as they exist now and as we anticipate upon reopening in the fall. So thank you so much. I look forward to the panel.
Thank you, Heather. I think they've given us a really good overview of all the organizations that are represented on our panel today. They were selected because they're in different parts of the state, but also because they're doing different things in their communities. And I think this will give us a broader view of what's happening as a part of their reaction to the pandemic. So I'm going to go through and ask a number of questions to each panelist. But if you're watching on Zoom, you can add your questions to the chat. If you're on Facebook, you can add your questions to the comment section, and we'll include those as we work through. To start things off, I'm really kind of curious about where everybody was in their programming when the pandemic hit and sort of changed the world for us. And I'm going to start with Steve. Steve, what were you doing at the Norton Center?
Well, the last week of January, I was just returning from an international folk conference in New Orleans, which shortly after became a hotspot. The day I got off the airplane, we had a performance with the Shanghai Ballet direct from China with 60+ dancers and crew. So it started to become more questionable. What's going to happen? Should we be having a dance company from China performing right now? There were a lot of questions, and really it began to sink that things were starting to change. And exactly 1 year ago today, we had a Cirque troupe from Canada come and perform, and we had a student matinee and an evening show, and we started to think if people are uncomfortable and need refunds, we're just going to honor that. But people were coming, and we had a reception afterward. I mean, so that feeling. And then 3 weeks later, we had our very last performance with a group that came from Argentina, and we were all bumping elbows instead of shaking hands and hugging, and it really became evident that things were changing. And unfortunately, we postponed from that point on, and the very next show was 2 days later, and the artist, a singer-songwriter who was on the road touring, we had to let her know that you're not going to be able to come. And I really felt it was important to say, number one, we owe you a hotel room. If you need hotels, we're going to cover that during that time, that from where you are now to where you were going to be the next day after our event, we're covering hotel. And number two, the deposit that was made, we just said, keep it. And we're in good faith, we'll continue to figure out what we're going to do next, but we just want you to get home and safe. So as we started to do that, we started looking at what was going to happen. We also had to start canceling the college's commencement, and the high school in the community always uses our space. All of the programs that the college puts on during the academic year, the theater plays, the dance programs, the concerts, were all canceled or postponed to whatever. So our building since then has become used for COVID testing for the faculty, staff, and students. Our lobby, as well as the theater spaces, are being used for larger classrooms.
Thanks, Steve. Sounds like you're still hopping over there, keeping busy. Lexi, what's going on? What was going on at the Yeiser when all of this started?
Well, we were just in the process of receiving artwork for our Fantastic Fibers exhibition. So as I mentioned before, that's a juried exhibition that's international. So people submit work from all over the world, and we literally receive those packages shipped from all over the world. So the logistics of that started to become really complicated when artists realized that we might have to be closed. We weren't exactly sure what we were going to do yet. So, you know, I just tried to assure all the artists that someone would be here to receive their package. We planned to install the work, and, you know, we weren't sure after that. But it was a lot of sort of dealing with the logistics of that, of, you know, having someone at the gallery, but not having multiple staff members be there at the same time, because we still weren't really sure what exactly was going on and how this was spreading. We weren't sure about whether, you know, the virus was like on packages. So there was a lot of anxiety about that. We actually had artists who didn't want to ship their work and then have it shipped back to them because they were immunocompromised and they were worried about, you know, potentially the spread of the virus from their artwork being shipped back to them. So yes, it was just kind of a logistics nightmare. And we were also in the midst of planning the Lowertown Arts and Music Festival. So that festival usually brings in about 20,000 people over the course of the weekend. We have multiple stages set up with musicians, and we have a bunch of artist booths and, you know, artists that are traveling from outside the region and musicians that are traveling from outside the region to come here. So we had to kind of figure out how we were going to handle that. And we decided initially to postpone for a date later in the year. You know, we thought at that point that we might be able to still host a large event later in the year. So it was a lot of just, you know, trying to reassure artists and musicians, even when we weren't exactly sure what our plan was. We did end up installing the Fantastic Fibers exhibition, and I guess it would be the first one in our history that had virtually no in-person visitors. So we had an exhibition, and actually I installed it basically by myself, because at that point, you know, we got to the point where we had furloughed staff. So it was a very strange feeling to be in the gallery by myself installing this gorgeous show that I kind of knew no one was going to see in person. But we did promote it online eventually, which I think we're going to talk more about, kind of our online strategy. So that was what we had going on.
Thanks, Lexi. I guess, you know, the beginning of the pandemic, when we didn't know how this disease or how this virus was being spread, the idea of handling packages that were being shipped to you must have been concerning. I can see why some of the artists might not have wanted to get their things back right away, because it was so unclear at that point what was going on. Josh, what was going on in Hindman? I know that it was winter time. We were just coming out of winter, actually, and I know that in that area that the weather can be harsh. So do you slow down your programming in the winter, or were you geared up and moving straight ahead?
So on any given day in Hindman, for our arts programs, we are actively in schools. We have a full-time folk arts educator, and then we bring on for week-long residencies at a time various other teaching artists through the Kentucky Arts Council Teaching Artist Directory. And so we we were actively in schools every day and had 5 residencies scheduled to take place in March on various disciplines. So that stopped pretty quickly. At one point, Hindman decided that we needed to pull back. And then of course, the schools made decisions about how in-person classes as well. So that impacted us greatly there. But you are correct. Lots of people may know Hindman Settlement School for our writers retreats, our annual writers workshop, folk week gatherings, various other kind of retreat style events that we offer in the arts. And we were actively in the middle of promoting those and registering for those. And so it was really a time to not know what was next. People were asking us, why about writers workshop? What are we going to do in July? Quite honestly, we didn't know, because in March, I think there was this almost a feeling at the onset that, this was just, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, or, a small little hiccup. And then by summer, and then it was like, oh, maybe we'll know more in April. And then, well, maybe May, maybe June. But then we see how that turned out. But we're happy to dive in more into some of the online strategy that Lexi mentioned. But, we were in classrooms every day here, and, classrooms ceased to exist. But fortunately, we've been able to find new ways to do that. That's where we were back in March 2020.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I remember we kept thinking that everything was going to go back to normal within a couple of weeks. And that must have been really hard for any arts organization or anyone, period, to figure out how to move forward. Heather, what was going on in Louisville?
I have to say, doing a little preparation for this, it's been interesting and fun to look back, because so much time has been looking forward now. But to look back to what were those conversations in March and in April and May, and to actually think how quickly we moved. But absolutely, as to what Josh said, our thought was, this is a few weeks, this is a month plus. We actually, in coordination with the state, had an executive order to close the Kentucky Center venue. And part of that was looking at the ability to carry out a number of events that were in front of us over the course of a few weeks, which we were all confident, yes, we're flattening the curve, yes, we're close. A month seems like a safe bet, and maybe we'll have an extension if needed from there. So it was a lot of quick movement. Our very last event that we executed was the swearing in of a federal judge. We were preparing within a few weeks of a Broadway show coming into the building. But ultimately, between date in mid-March to the end of June, we ended up moving or canceling 94 performances and 40 non-performance events. So just to that point, and very different numbers as we look to year to date. So it was a lot of quick action. We did also take quick action as an organization and looking at what the impact was going to be as far as our expenses. There were fixed expenses that with no revenue coming in outside of contributions. What was that going to look like? And so quickly we had to make some, and when I say quickly, I mean a number of weeks, changes to the organization to reduce expenses ultimately to 75%. We reduced expenses by 75%. And the impact to that for people was pretty big in terms of moving a number of employees to furlough, and some whose positions were eliminated in time, knowing that when we returned, we were going to be smaller. So it was quite a process. I want to highlight Governor's School for the Arts, one of the programs that we administer, very quickly moved to an online process for their auditions. They too, were within weeks of having the final audition for the program. And they were able to hold all of that in an online environment and ultimately plan a summer program in a digital format, all for the first time. So they have, done so much amazing work to learn quickly, utilize software, and find ways they can still fulfill their mission, just in a very different way. So quite a whirlwind when you look back at just the few months after we all, really absorb the reality of this is here in our community and is going to greatly change our world.
Yeah, here at the Arts Council, we were setting up for the Kentucky Crafted Market out at the Horseback Park. We were actually there with our trucks and vans loaded down. We were packing in and got the word that things were going to be shut down. So yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. It was so sort of startling that it happened so quickly, but there were so many questions. Yes. You've all talked about sort of your immediate reaction to the shutdown and the things that you thought might be happening or might not be happening. And I'm wondering, did this cause you to hold off on programming? As Heather said, the governor's school immediately jumped into doing online once they realized they weren't going to be able to open. But how long did it take you to shift to another way of working and start reaching out to your audience to let them know this? Steve?
So we initially took a pause. And in the industry, we had an intermission. We just closed the curtains and just wanted to wait and see what was going to happen. We wanted to observe and discuss. And I think good leadership isn't always being the leader. And sometimes it's following, and sometimes it's just taking a step back. And what we really did, we knew that there were a lot of organizations around the country in places that are getting hit very hard, having to react so quickly. And we wanted to look at those as lessons of how we can respond and come up with a plan. So we decided that we were not going to reschedule anything until at least the start of the new year, of the new fiscal year, so September of 2020. And so we just put that pause. We also had a mandate from the college that starting in March, no public were going to be allowed on our campus in the buildings, because the students are the priority one for the college. So not only were we looking at this, but we were also told no public programs in person. So that was a lot of turmoil trying to figure things out. But what we did start doing some programming, and I think that'll come from another question in May of 2020, doing some virtual programming. So just really trying to observe and see what the pulse was, and not make some major decisions right away, but see how others were doing it. And we had state guidelines and mandates, and we also had from the college what they were telling us. We had an exhibit open that had just opened, and we were going to only have it for a couple of months. Well, that exhibit is still ongoing, and we said, let's not take it down. We still have people coming into our lobby for all the testing. We were able to have student groups come on campus, come into the venue and meet with the author for some really small group gallery talks, because the students and faculty were still allowed on campus. So we opened up some internal programming to help provide some kind of cultural experiences.
Thanks, Steve. Lexi, what were you doing?
Well, like Steve mentioned, we also kind of just took a bit of an intermission right away to see what was happening in the industry, what other organizations were doing, what other nonprofits in our community were doing. We were really closely following all of our city and state guidelines, and of course, just having tons of meetings with our board of directors to try to figure out how and when we could reopen, and if we should just postpone events or if we should just cancel everything. So at first we really were trying to postpone, and we had that optimism, and then we kind of got to the point that we said we just need to cancel everything essentially for the rest of the year. And then if we can bring things back, we will. So we did slowly bring back in-person exhibitions. We still have not had any kind of receptions or any kind of events with, multiple people gathered together, but we did bring back those exhibitions where we can easily manage the flow of people in and out of the gallery. And we just had to shift a lot of our programming to more of an online format. And that took us a little bit of time to kind of sort out what we wanted to promote online and how we could do that.
Josh, what were you doing when you started thinking about this in Hindman?
So what was impacted immediately was our school-based and after-school programs. At that point, we did have to cancel a writer's retreat that we have every spring, and that was just a casualty of the season. But we were actively continuing to plan for summer programs and did not stop that at all. We were committed to figuring out whatever, at that point, we thought the thing went back, so we were just playing ahead. But I guess looking back, we now say we were committed to doing something, so we were still planning. What we did immediately was, of course, school visits and residencies did not happen, but we had every week, there was after-school music lessons twice a week, and then there's after-school poetry clubs and after-school painting. So those kids were actively in the middle of activities, and we were not equipped at that time to really take things to live online. I mean, we weren't really thinking of that, but we had some generous funding. Our partners that help us do that work, we had conversations with them, and we were really committed to making sure that artists were paid and supported during that. So we were able to work with them that our teaching instructors and our musicians were able to do pre-recorded lessons. And so those are still online. And we were able to pay them their normal stipends and honorariums for conducting their remaining 10 lessons that they had for each of those. And we recorded those and shared those out. There wasn't live interaction, but kids that still had their instruments at home were able to get a weekly lesson to continue practicing at home. And we were still able to support artists that depend, quite frankly, on the gig that they have with us and other organizations as part of their income. And so we were grateful that our funders worked with us to ensure that that continued to happen for them. We can get into how we evolved after that, but those pre-recorded lessons are still online. So if anybody wants to check out how to play the banjo and tune it, there's some lessons online on our YouTube channel for you.
Thanks, Josh. Actually, I may look at that. Not that I'm a musician, but it would be interesting to watch. Heather, tell me what was going on there.
So I shared earlier that, looking back at timelines, I was kind of marveling in the last couple of days at how quickly we pivoted, which at the time did not feel very quick. But from March to April, and getting a better sense of this going on for some time, we quickly looked at the opportunity to create a digital program called KPA at Home. And we launched that the second week of April, and we ran it through the end of June. And it was very simple and not simple. Simple in that it was artists in their home, just totally natural setting, whatever they had production value around them, sharing their art via Facebook and via YouTube. So we tapped into, our database to, put forth these offerings, every single day. And ultimately, in those months we served, we had 74 different shows that we presented. And what Josh said resonated. I mean, this is one example, and there are others where it was really important to look at how can we, and it's in a small way, but how can we continue to work with artists? How can we continue to serve our audiences? And it became very, hyper focused on local. Let's really partner within our local community. And so we already had so many wonderful relationships through all of the outreach programs that we do. Really diverse artists, all different genres, and that was great. We took it a step further, and I'll give credit to our senior programming manager, Aaron Palmer, who led us through a number of these creative efforts, but really kind of curated this entire experience, including bringing on curators, so hiring some individuals around the state. So it started very Louisville focused and really utilizing local artists there in our community, but really went to pockets of the state. And so we were able to have artists that were represented from across the state. So we're thrilled about that, and ultimately had over $8,000 in artist fees that we were able to invest. We were able to get some funding from the Tourism, Arts, and Heritage Cabinet to work toward this effort, and some others. But we then sort of translated that, of course, with being connected to the larger touring industry. Of offerings started coming our way, you know, of shows that were going digital. So we would certainly grab a hold of those that made sense, and offer those up to our database. And that has continued throughout this, you know, pandemic experience. We continue to do that. We also, as we approach the summer months, and has already been referenced by other groups, you know, over these months, we were doing the work of looking at other reopening efforts, you know, the state guidelines, what was coming out from different member organizations, to sort of really look at best practice for reopening. So we were putting our plans together. And with that, we were looking at what could we do outdoor. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but our new venue, Paristown, has an outdoor space, Christie's Garden. It's not a large space, but it's beautiful. It's a part of a larger development, and it is sort of just on the outskirts of downtown Louisville. And on the back of the Kentucky Center, we have the Belvedere. So we have a couple of outdoor spaces. So we started working with some donors around the possibility of sponsoring some programming that we could do in the garden. We ended up getting sponsorship, which was wonderful, and doing a couple of events in the fall, and we'll have more this spring. And so we did a whole reopening COVID plan with pods. And we did this, I'll give you one example. We partnered with the Kentucky Opera in an evening to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so we shared the documentary on the side of the Paristown building. One of the key pieces of the architecture is a huge wall cast screen. And we showed the documentary, and had a performance from Kentucky Opera, a number of vocalists, all female vocalists. It was a really beautiful evening, and the audience that came, they felt safe. They were so happy to re-engage. So it was just a little bit of a test to sort of get back out there and see. And we are planning, you know, some more events this spring. And then we also, I'll highlight the orchestra. They, this isn't KPA, we're a partner in this, but the orchestra figured out in some real planning, how could they get back and do live stream performances? How could they do it safely? They had, of course, a lot they had to work through with the orchestra, with the musicians, but they have created the opportunity and have now done a fall and are now in a spring season where they are doing live stream concerts at Paristown, our newest venue. And so it's incredible to have music being made, you know, in the venue, and have their audiences to, you know, continue to be able to engage. GSA, I mentioned, we went online and did the program this summer. And now we're in the process of looking at the possibility of in-person. We're planning for in-person this summer, but still exploring what a digital format would look like. And lastly, I'll just highlight quickly an education program, because outside of GSA, the other programs like Josh mentioned, where we're doing work in community centers and in schools and in healthcare facilities, all of that sort of went on, intermission, went on total pause for safety reasons, and our overall operation really scaling down. But we had an ongoing relationship with Stage 1 to work with Jefferson County Public Schools to do some teacher training and to work with schools. We worked with 18 partner schools to really look at their arts programming. And we were able to take that to a digital realm. So in the past, it's been an in-school, you know, on-site training. And we worked, you know, with JCPS, with Stage 1, and totally pivoted that to an online, very successful program that's happening right now. So those are a few examples.
So it sounds like everybody pretty quickly adjusted to an online format of some way to present their work, which is good because those were your only options. I wonder if any of you have a particular platform that you're using. Do you use multiple platforms? Do you have something you especially recommend? And how are you attracting your audiences to your online content? How are you letting them know about it? Steve?
Great. Well, so I hadn't talked about our programming that we're doing right now, but we are doing a series of programs called Culture Plus, where we are intersecting culture and the arts with some topic. And that topic would be from, and actually, I'm going to just share this if you don't mind. So in the pandemic, we started this Culture Plus series where we really focused on what our on goals of being strong and transparent with communication to our patron base, identifying programs that would stay true to our mission of transformative experiences, serving the regional community, serving the college community, and serving the Norton Center, the arts community, while also being flexible and offering that we're relevant. We're here right now, and it's with our friends and neighbors. So we are doing this through, and you'll see also that one of our goals was, is now even stronger, diversity and social justice. So even when we look at esports and gaming, we looked at the diversity issues and the gender disparity, and we had conversations with people in the community that are active as coaches and as participants. So we're really involving the community. We decided to do this through just through basic Zoom. So hopefully that would be as accessible as possible. We then also do live stream record on Facebook simultaneously, and we record each program. And it's not just talking heads. We want to make sure that the stories are really what's key, and asking people questions about their personal lives. We didn't want to talk data and facts and opinions. We really wanted people to tell their stories. And that's really, I think, been resonating really well. So using this platform has allowed us not only to have these conversations in a very easy and accessible way, but we record the program. We then have a Facebook, or a web page for each program afterward that includes more resources about the panelists, the artists, the thought leaders, and the topic itself, so people can take a deeper dive.
Have you been able to monetize any of your online programming?
Well, let's look at monetization in a different way. We really focus on our database of who are our patrons and ticket buyers and attendees. And instead of spending money on advertising for these programs, since they are much more organic and community driven, we really have been focusing on building and maintaining that audience. So for us, monetization with these programs has been ensuring that we're getting our members and our patrons engaged and feeling connected to the Norton Center and the arts in our community throughout all of these programs.
Makes sense. Lexi.
Yeah, so we are actually still like really actively working on this new form of working online. So I think, you know, a lot of things we're talking about is like as if it's in the distant past, but for us as a small organization with a limited budget and limited staff, strong online presence was something that we already really lacked. And this whole pandemic really gave us the push to invest in it more, spend more time on it. You know, we just had to. So we're actually having our website rebuilt. I mean, that's just a, you know, really simple thing that was, it was just really antiquated. So, you know, again, as a small organization, it was something that I think we'd had, you know, board members kind of help put together through the years, and it just wasn't working for us anymore. So that became really apparent that we had to up our game, you know, website, social media, just all across the board. Our technology was lacking. So, you know, and like I said, that's still something that we're building on, and we're going to continue to build on. That's going to be more of a, I think, consistent part of our programming going forward. Like Heather mentioned, we did a similar sort of program where one thing we knew we could do easily was just like social media, get artists information out, go to artist studios, the ones that, you know, we're okay with letting us come visit, record some videos, see what artists are doing, or have artists send us instructional videos to share with our community so that people would have the opportunity to try some new techniques or just still feel inspired. So this was a part of that Keep Paducah Creative initiative that we began during the pandemic, once we realized that we would have to be really more creative about our creativity. It wasn't just going to be so straightforward. And, you know, it's hard in an industry where you're really dependent on people walking in the doors of your organization and seeing what you're doing, seeing it in person, making donations, getting excited about your programming. Shifting that excitement to an online format is very challenging. So that's why I say it's kind of an ongoing thing for us. We have to work hard to get better in that area. And that's, you know, what we're working at.
I think that's one of the things that's been hard for everybody in the arts industry anyway, is that we're so used to one-on-one or other sort of in-person communications. And this has really changed the way we have to think and look at what we do. In order to make those connections. So I suppose in a way it's been really good because it's caused us to think outside the box in ways we hadn't even wanted to probably. But I think you guys have been doing a great job. I've been looking at all of the work that you've been doing and it's really exciting. Lexi, are you, I know that you've done a lot of things on YouTube. You've been showing artist videos on YouTube. Are you using your website for some of that, or are you mostly focused on YouTube or Facebook?
Yeah, we're planning to have that content available on our website, but actually if you go to our website right now, it's just like an under construction page because it's almost ready. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have a really cool website that has a lot of great content and is way more user friendly. But yeah, we did actually during the Fantastic Fibers exhibition last year, when we couldn't have people in the gallery, we actually recruited a few local musicians that were also okay with coming into the gallery and recording some music. So that way people could see the artwork that we had up in the gallery, they could enjoy that music. And we were also giving those musicians that opportunity to, you know, still be a little bit active in their field. So, but yeah, all those videos, I think will transition over to the website, but we did, you know, we used, of course, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube just as a, you know, easy and direct form of communication.
And it's very effective, I think. Those are all very accessible to people, and a lot of people are used to those particular platforms. So that was great. Josh, I know that the Makery had been doing online content for a few years. Yeah. How did you all move forward? Is that the same model that you moved forward with, or did you move to something else?
So the Makery is our online, we've been doing distance learning on virtual classes for some of our programs for a number of years now. And so we had built out a platform that we use. It's called Vanilla, if anybody cares to get into it. But Vanilla is what we use for our kind of discussion boards and kind of prompts and responses. But we have kind of shifted entirely. So when we wanted to, what you all have said, I would echo that the community aspect was incredibly important. And even as our video showed, is that, you know, the settlement has been a gathering place, and it's been a place where people come and you gather and you learn. And so that was when we started looking at how we make a path forward in this interim time. It was making sure community, it wasn't just talking heads, or it wasn't just, you know, we were putting out writing prompts, or it wasn't just how a kid can watch a video, but, you know, how do we build community? And so the first real challenge we had in that was probably with our writers workshop that I know you had some experience with. And so hopefully as part of that, we made a conscious effort to how to, even in a virtual environment, can we try to show to those participants that this is a community of individuals that we are building and we are supporting together. And so I won't say it was fancy, and of course Zoom was an integral part of it, but, you know, we tried to build out a custom web page that we called a portal. It was, you know, not publicly accessible, you know, that had we made menus of like what we would have prepared for you had you been on campus. You can cook along with us, and we sold kits. So it's like, here's how you would make our apple butter pie. If you want to make that on Tuesday night, we'll all have apple butter pie together. You know, we recorded hour-long segments of campus, of the bird feeders, of the creek, of just different things that you could put if you wanted to while you were riding, that you could play in the background to think that you were here as almost a window into Hindman and what it would be like. You know, we made virtual Zoom backgrounds. This is one that I'm using today, that we captured different photos that while you were in your classrooms, if you wanted to say that you were in the Great Hall with us for your class. So we just thought it was not expensive. It didn't cost us anything to do any of that. As a matter of fact, it actually supported some of the work in selling those meal kits that that our farm team prepared. So it was really, how can we build community? And so that kind of moved out to that for this fall and for spring as well. We took that portal kind of feel that we had for Writers Workshop, and we bought a new domain name. It's hindmanatHome.org. And so if you're enrolled in a class with us, we'll send you login credentials for this new kind of back-end website that we have that has a very similar vibe, that has more resources, a community feel, ways to connect. And, that's something that we anticipate to continue. We certainly hope that we will have in-person classes again. So that's going to happen. But, what if there is always, what if one of those after-school classes that we offer every year is on Hindman at Home? And, what if, even for Moving Beyond Arts, even if our dyslexia program, what if we always have a virtual tutoring option for those students, for those kids that can't get to Hindman or that we're not serving them? We've been mailing quilting kits to kids for this spring's after school class. And so, what if there's always that option for them, that if you're not in Hindman, that you can still be a part? And so we've seen how we can do drive-through pickups of embroidery cloths and hoops for those classes, or that we can send home. We mail paint sets to kids, and that way that when they connect with the teaching artists, that they have them on Hindman. So we've tried to think of new ways to build community and not just rely on the heads. And it's not been expensive, which has been kind of the fun thing to see as part of this, that we've been able to do that and not pay thousands of dollars for some sort of custom platform or a website, or, it's all been in-house grown. It's very accessible to do.
One of the things that I like that you all did during the Appalachian Writers Workshop is you, excuse me, allowed people to have time to socialize on Zoom, so that while you weren't there getting the on-site experience, you still were able to get to know people outside of the workshops.
Yeah, we had evening happy hours on where people could come on. We tried things that didn't work. We tried to do multiple rooms, because if you're on campus, some people might go gather at the gathering place, and some may go to the chapel. And we thought, we'll build different rooms. But then we quickly learned that everybody just wanted to be together, and that people would run back and forth between the different Zoom rooms that we're offering. So we quickly learned some lessons there. But the idea that, and then even participants, they've, in some of our groups, we were just doing evening ones, and they started doing morning coffee hours, because that time that they spent before their classes in the morning in our dining hall connecting was so important to them, that they asked, hey, can we do this and promote this? And yeah, so we, modified the links and platform to say, so, participant led coffee hours. And so, yeah, it was very important for us to build that in from the start.
Yeah, it was really great. It was a lot of fun. Heather, how are you all doing the online presentations at the Kentucky Performing Arts? I know you've been having a lot of online presentations. So what exactly is your approach to that?
It depends on the program. So when the very early days with KPA at Home, we did that. We did get some underwriting. And so those were free offerings to the community, because we all, just like today, need art, need to learn and heal and connect, and all the reasons. So that was a free offering, but I will note we had a Cash App on there. I think we used Venmo to give to the artists. So while we were paying the artists, we certainly too wanted it to be a platform for others who were introduced to these artists to support them. As we went along, most of what we have done, there hasn't, other than offerings that have come our way, you know, through agents and such that are live stream experiences. We'll sell tickets, you know, we'll sell tickets and offer those, and there'll be a percentage that we get. But kind of as Steve said, when you talk about monetizing and even attendance, you kind of have to change your expectations. You know, what does that look like? So we definitely aren't looking as though like digital is the way. I think it's a tool, and there are ways we can utilize it going forward. Another opportunity we had that was very important to us, and it is each year, is how do we celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day? And in the past, we've done a community art celebration. And so we thought we really need to do something this year more than any other year for a lot of reasons. I mean, for the COVID reason and needing to connect to one another, to really recognize what was going on in our community and across the country around racial justice and social justice. So we were able to work with Jazz at Lincoln Center and Wynton Marsalis, and we, with that overall sponsorship I earlier referenced, we parceled that out over a number of opportunities, and that was one of them. And so we did that as free to the community. And with that, Josh reminded me something that I think, oh my gosh, this never would have happened, or I couldn't have envisioned this happening, is, you know, certainly when we've had Jazz at Lincoln Center before, Wynton Marsalis is very, very generous. Also in this environment, Jazz at Lincoln Center said, we are happy to do a community Zoom session. So we had 30 young people who were, like all of us, face-to-face here on our screens, had the opportunity to engage with Mr. Marsalis. He created a piece that was the program that was very much, it was written during COVID. It was recognizing all of the issues that are at play in our community. So it's very relevant. And we had 1,100 views, which we kind of jumped up and down about, because I think that's pretty, from what we have experienced, I see Steve's nodding his head, that's pretty darn good. You manage your expectations about the viewership. One other that I'll highlight, we did a program that we released on Valentine's weekend. And we again did it as a free offering where we had a number of artists that came together, artist pairings, diverse genres, diverse artists, incredibly beautiful. And it was just, again, about sort of like healing through the arts and the time that we're in. We did it at Paristown, we recorded it, produced it, and then released that to those that sort of RSVP. They got their ticket, but it was a free ticket. But what we chose to do was an opportunity to please give and support Kentucky performing arts if you're able to. And we raised $4,000. So we had 600 people who thus far have viewed that. There'll be more opportunities, and we raised over 4,000. So that's meaningful. And as Steve said, it's really the base that we have. It takes more dollars to go beyond your base. You've got to have those marketing dollars, and right now, you know, that's not a possibility. But it's important to recognize that relevancy to your base, while we're not able to come together as we normally are, is so important. And what we have seen is many of those, and I can't give you a number, I wish I could, have become donors. So continuing to serve your base, and maybe they were engaged as ticket buyers in the past or participants in your programs, they've actually come on board as a donor. And so I think that's a pretty important outcome.
It sounds like, even though this at the beginning looked like it was going to be such a challenge and everybody was going to really struggle to make adjustments because you didn't know what was happening, but it sounds like everybody has really sort of taken it in stride and turned it into something that's been hugely beneficial to the community, but also to the arts organization. And I'm wondering, have you kept your original audiences as you've been making these transitions? And have you added audiences? Because now you've got an opportunity for people all around the world to see what you're doing. Have you built audience? Did you feel any reluctance from your current audience or your previous audience to participating? Steve?
We haven't seen any negatives. I think this has all been positive. And for online talking head panels like this one, I mean, we really tried to find ways that it would be beyond just speaking. So we try to have an artist with every program of these creative Culture Plus programs, so that we have interludes, we have breakout where they'll just go into it. And if it doesn't make sense within the body of the program, we have what we called Culture Plus Encores, so that we had a 60-minute talk, and then immediately after, for 10, 15 minutes, an artist actually performed, or we did a gallery talk of the exhibit that we have that no one has seen. But so we have opportunities to have these cultural sharings. What really has been amazing for us has been the partnerships and new collaborations, not only because we're taking topics that are relevant, like Black Lives Matter and sports. You know, we had an NFL player last week on one of our calls. We're trying to make this more popular so it's more relevant to the community members. And these partnerships have been incredible. We did one program that was looking at Native American perspective of Thanksgiving a week before Thanksgiving with an all Indigenous panel. And they were all artists from Kentucky with Kentucky roots. And that couldn't have happened without the support of the Kentucky Arts Council saying, we want to involve you, you know, we want to get involved, you know, how can we help? And the Kentucky Native American Heritage Commission, and then we couldn't do our student matinees and our student programs, so we started partnering. We did a small groups, we called some of our best teacher friends, and said, what do you need? And as we go into spring right now, what are you going to need? You're not coming here, we know that, and they're like, Zoom is great, but just make it 20 minutes long. And we can give and they don't have to be lectures. We want things that the students from their own Zooms can be entertained. So we've partnered with the Lexington Children's Theater, the Allegro Dance Project, a Japanese origami artist, and the Harlem Quartet and Anthony McGill, who's the Avery Fisher Prize winner this year, to do 4 or 5 different programs that will then be launched for students. And they can use them anyway. And we have a fund that normally goes to free ticket subsidy that we put those towards the partnership and production costs. So it's really turned into something pretty amazing where we're having more conversations with the community when we're finding the different panelists who are from our community and they're not connected to the arts. They're actually now becoming connected and they see their role in a more cultural, artistic way. So that network is starting to trickle out. So it's really been pretty cool. And to see that we get 200 to 400 registrants for every one of our Culture Plus programs, and granted, students get an incentive towards a credit of class to attend these activities. So the students boost the attendance. However, we're still seeing 50 to 75 of those 200 that come on a call being from our Norton Center community. So I feel like these have been working and people are really making those conversations and connections with various people has been really positive.
Thanks, Steve. It seems like it's just been an opportunity to reach people that maybe you haven't been reaching before, that can now make a connection and feel some sort of ownership without having to walk into your space. That's just another opportunity to build.
It's funny you say that because in 2 weeks, we have the Harlem Quartet with Anthony McGill doing a live stream, which we had not planned on doing, but the Harlem Quartet is our artist in residence for the campus this year for the college. And I said, let's do something now that we have this opportunity that we couldn't have done before, and that they haven't since they've been here a year, and this is almost the end of their year residency. Let's do something that puts it on steroids and really makes it cool. And we talked about doing a Valerie Coleman piece, who is from Louisville. It's a piece about an homage to Muhammad Ali and West Louisville. So there's diversity, sports, jazz. I mean, it's all of these different elements. And we're doing this live from New York, and that adding the dimension of diversity as just part of what we do now on a regular basis and a more intentional. We are always focused on diversity, It's really been a great opportunity for us. And I said, let's promote this in a way that you've never gone to a classical music concert before. Wear your pajamas, have a drink in your hand, sit comfortably in your couch. This is free. Clap whenever you want. I mean, let's get people to take risk on something that's very low risk.
That's great. Lexi, what are you doing down there? What are your audiences looking like these days?
Well, like you mentioned, we kind of had the opportunity to grow our audience, through social media. So our exhibitions last year that we were promoting more heavily online reached, countries and numbers of people that we never would have imagined. So in that way, it's been very, very positive. Of course, now that we have the gallery back open to the public, people walking in the door, we're not seeing as much foot traffic. I think that's also seasonal. And in a way, it's kind of a relief. We don't want too much foot traffic. We have to be able to manage that. But yes, the online reach, that has been very apparent that has grown significantly for us. And as Steve was mentioning, kind of about working in new ways with partners and finding out what like the schools need, that has been a focus for us. So we're actually working right now we're going to do a big push for an art supply drive for local art classrooms that are lacking the supplies that they need because they've been hit so hard over the past year with new challenges. So, we're trying to find out how we can support the things and the places that we did in the past, or the partner organizations, what's relevant now. And that has just changed so much. So we do work really closely. We always work really closely with the other arts nonprofits in Paducah, but now we're having different kinds of conversations about how we change those events that we normally would have together, and how we make them work now in this totally different world.
Josh, how are things out there with your audience in Hindman?
So I'll just briefly say that there have been increases in our after school programs as a result. So normally we would have in a traditional just after school club that meets on campus, maybe 8 to 10 kids want to come learn to quilt. Now that we've been able to do kits that we mail and make it accessible across, where anybody can do it and not have to get to a physical location, every week. Over 24 kids, I think now are participating in different fiber arts programs that we're offering. So small increases there, but then we look at even our writers workshops, those keynotes that we have on campus in our facilities. Normally that would be 100, 150 people would gather in that space to hear that talk. When I pulled up the stats while we were looking, while we were talking here, and last year those, because we took them online, and we was over 16,000 people listened to those keynotes and presentations over the course of that week, instead of what would have been 300 folks would have heard those normally. So just the increase in that. So I think that tells us that we're going to keep doing that. So even whenever the Great Hall is full again, of 100 people on the banks of Troublesome Creek, there is also going to be some way we'll figure out how to mount a camera in the back of that room, and those will always be broadcast live for the world to hear. So we definitely want to make sure that we are taking lessons about increasing accessibility and increasing viewership, and applying that moving forward, but also finding ways to go back to some of those former ways of engaging our audiences as well.
Heather, how about you?
Yes, Josh, to that point about accessibility, the ability, it opens the possibilities up and maybe removes some barriers. So I think that's going to be something that we're looking at more closely when we return, is what role, does the digital format play? Our audience, I don't think necessarily has grown. I think we've been able to engage people. And I mentioned earlier, some additional donors that have come on board, which is great. But I do think, I think for us, it's more about building the relationships with individual artists that we've worked with, and then also the partnerships. And I've heard that mentioned by the other panelists. There's one that I'll highlight, and there's an organization in Louisville called AMPed. It's the Academy of Music, Production, Education, and Development. We've worked with them over the years in a number of ways. And when we were doing the online digital KPA at home, we began discussion about, wouldn't it be wonderful to sort of give AMPed a platform and to share spaces, share audiences. So we kind of invited them to come in for a week and kind of curate a week of digital programming. And so what that did, hopefully for them, is open up their world a little bit to new audience members, new interests, folks that might be interested in getting their son or daughter involved with the AMPed program. So it was just a great way for us to partner with another organization in town and give them more of a voice and more of a platform.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has been such a great discussion. I really appreciate all the information you've been willing to share with us today.